what's up everyone? Welcome to Phoenix Ascends Gaming, and more specifically, welcome to the first ever review published on this channel. I hope that you are doing well and you will enjoy the review format. After much consideration, I have decided to have Yooka Replayee serve as the debut review for the channel. If you enjoy comprehensive review content, I'm happy to convey that I plan to release reviews on an ongoing cadence. Please tune into the channel feed to receive updates regarding all forthcoming gaming impressions and reviews from Phoenix Ascends Gaming. This channel's spoiler-free review content will consist of retro titles as well as recently released games, all of which I've personally completed and will be subject to a set of 15 criteria I've historically used to review games over the past 5 years. Each individual criteria range from 1 to 10 points, enabling every game the opportunity to obtain a maximum score of 150 points. Please note, the game subject to review today does not feature voice acting, and can only achieve a maximum score of 140 points. However, before I delve into these particulars, I will first provide historical context and background for this title. Yooka Replayee is a 3D platformer released on October 9th, 2025 for PC, Steam, the PlayStation 5, Xbox X and S, as well as Nintendo Switch 2. It was developed by Playtonic Games and published by PM Studios in collaboration with Playtonic Friends. Gamers fond of titles such as Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie will find a lot to love with Yooka Replayee, because Playtonic Games was founded by many of the same developers who previously worked on Kazooie and Tooie and were pivotal contributors. Speaking from personal experience as someone who adored Banjo-Kazooie and the sequel, this title, deemed to be a spiritual successor, is a must-play. However, it should be mentioned that Replayee, as the name implies, can best be described as a high-caliber remaster of the original title, Yooka-Laylee, released in 2017. As such, Yooka Replayee is a definitive remastered and enhanced version of the 2017 title, featuring fresh content and robust improvements, such as dramatically improved visuals and modernized controls, all of which will be discussed in greater detail later in this review. Now, let us talk about the first review criteria, that is, the quality of the game's narrative. The game is light in the narrative department, as it takes elements from platforming juggernauts such as Nintendo's Super Mario franchise, as well as Sony's Astrobot titles. Simply put, Yooka-Laylee was not a game designed with narrative depth at the forefront in 2017, and nothing in Replayee changes that. Although it is worth mentioning, the story now features significantly better pacing and includes improved cutscenes, many of which are used to deliver the series' pun-based humor to great effect. Although, I would be remiss to omit discussing the story entirely. In it, the main characters, the chameleon, Yooka, and his bat friend Laylee, crash their ship, discover a mysterious book, and embark on a charming adventure to reclaim the world's most coveted treasure, from the villainous Capital B and his sidekick Dr. Quack. As you might have already gathered, nearly every character in this game features humorous and clever puns associated with their names and/or titles. Nevertheless, despite evident improvements in the narrative, the game still lacks narrative depth and suffers from negative narrative restrictions often inherent to 3D platformers. The story does enough to keep the charming experience moving forward, although it is clearly secondary to other aspects of the title. Thus, I'll award the game a 7.5 out of 10 regarding its narrative quality. Now that you know how I feel about the game's narrative quality in broad strokes, let us examine how the narrative is structured and paced. Simply put, the narrative pacing in Yooka Replayee is solid, and much of that is credit to a singular, yet transformative improvement the development team implemented. This change empowers players right out of the gate by supplying them with their entire moveset from the beginning of the game. This change significantly sets Replayee apart from the 2017 release, during which players were forced to unlock all respective toolkits in tedious fashion, as they progress through the narrative, often by engaging in puzzles and minigames that diminish the game's pacing. Ultimately, I feel this more straightforward approach was a very wise design choice that results in 1. The game feeling much more responsive and modernized, and 2. Permits players to experiment with new additions to the character's movesets, such as the dual partner role and bubble glide. Once equipped with all the bells and whistles, Yooka and Laylee venture from one storybook world to another, obtaining a variety of collectibles, such as pages, used to unlock the next pagey door to progress the story, coins, used to purchase cosmetics and upgrades, and area-specific quills, used to purchase additional upgrades such as hearts, tonics, etc. This rinse and repeat approach to exploration all accumulates to the character's final encounter with capital B in a confrontation to decide the fate of their world. With all of that considered, I will award the narrative pacing and Yooka Replayee an 8 out of 10. Now, let us evaluate the game's characters and how they impact the overall experience. Like the narrative, the characters in Yooka Replayee are secondary to the game's strengths. Nevertheless, the devs did a respectable job of creating memorable characters that perpetuate the lighthearted and humor-filled theme the game was shooting for. I also believe they were striving to create characters that were spiritual successors to Banjo and Kazooie, and that Yooka and Laylee function in a very similar manner. One laid back, endearing and heroic, the other being snarky, wisecracking, and borderline rude. Their abilities when working in tandem with their personalities and banter are the primary drivers of the gameplay, which also facilitates how the story progresses. They are assisted by the slithery pant-wearing snake, Trousers, who interacts with the duo in a support role. An other noteworthy side character is the nefarious Dr. Quack, whose support for Capital B is unwavering, despite Capital B's propensity to patronize him. In fact, some of the most humorous and most memorable moments of the game transpire courtesy of Dr. Quack's trope-esque tendencies. Finally, speaking of Capital B, I cannot in good conscience discuss the character roster while ignoring the game's chief antagonist. While failing to live up to the reputation of Kazooie and Tooie's arch-nemesis, Gruntilda the Witch, Capital B is an adequate enemy for the duo, who exhibits dubious behaviors befitting of a corrupt businessman who is vain, cruel, and impulsive. Without spoiling story specifics, players need only know that Capital B is motivated by a selfish desire to rewrite history by acquiring a very precious item. Gruntilda's downfall was her vain nature and underestimating Banjo and Kazooie. It would be accurate to say that Capital B's shortcomings are very similar indeed. With everything in mind, it can be argued that the game features a decently robust cast of colorful and memorable characters, all of whom serve their respective roles appropriately. However, conforming to traditional 3D platforming norms also often means restricting characters in the areas of depth and development. This considered, along with the characters failing to live up to the precedents set by other genre contemporaries, I feel comfortable awarding Yooka Replayee a 7.5 out of 10 in this category. Now, let us progress to one of the most significant and refined features in this game, its gameplay. While light in the narrative department and adhering to the status quo regarding its characters, Yooka Replayee excels in the gameplay department as it features very responsive controls that are vastly improved from the 2017 release. Replayee has players explore vibrant worlds and diverse biomes where they solve puzzles and collect items called pages to progress. Ultimately, players need to acquire 120 pages in total to initiate the final confrontation with Capital B. Being a 3D platformer and collect-a-thon at heart, the game adheres to the genre's traditional gameplay formula and sees the duo equipped with a basic jump, glide, and dash feature from the get-go. Exploration is another strength that ties directly into gameplay, because all storybook levels feature a different transformation to change how your character traverses and interacts with the environment. For instance, once the duo provide a molecule to the quippy octopus-like character, Dr. Puzz, her DN Ray can transform the duo into a flower in the Tribal Stack Tropics, a snowplow in the Glitter Glaze Glacier, a school of piranha in the Moody Maze Marsh, and many, many more. Moreover, Replayee features a decent amount of variety concerning its minigames and puzzles, both of which work nicely with its collect-a-thon type exploration, and which make the gameplay fun and feel engaging, while rarely diverting from the traditional 3D platformer formula. Well, as they say, if it ain't broke, right? Everything considered, Replayee's gameplay is a strength and is refined enough to earn a 9 out of 10 from me. It is clear from watching gameplay trailers that Replayee's main allure are its bright and vibrant worlds, along with strong gameplay. However, more significant questions arise regarding its combat. Is it too simple? Is it too punishing? Let us discuss. Assessing the combat in this game can be challenging because while one can argue that the combat and movement are fun and rewarding, You can also argue the combat is simplistic and lacking in variety and meaningful progression. Although despite these evident shortcomings, it's clear that Playtonic Games struck a decent balance of using mostly technical platforming to complement its basic combat. In doing so, the studio created an enjoyable and accessible experience. In addition to having the ability to tailspin unsuspecting enemies to the abyss, our protagonists have other abilities at their disposal, such as a tongue whip, sonar blasts, and situational-based powers procured from ingesting special berries found in different levels. Thankfully, while basic enemies require little to no tactical innovation to defeat, boss encounters are more complex and involve players memorizing patterns, using the environment, positioning, and utilizing different upgrades, tonics, etc. Whereas the 2017 release was more of a challenge given you did not possess all abilities at the start, Replayee is more forgiving and the challenging combat becomes much less about skill and tactics and more about having fun while experimenting with traversal options, all while collecting items to progress the story. Ultimately, I enjoyed the combat, and it checked off the buddy platformer box rather than satisfy my desire to engage in a hardcore action game. There was a lot of fun to have here, and it's for those reasons that I described, I will award the game an 8 out of 10 regarding its combat. You can clearly see that I enjoyed the gameplay and combat in this title, as evidenced by the high scores in the previous two categories. Although, what do I think about the game's soundtrack? This is a very subjective category, but did the composers do enough to innovate while appealing to the roots of the spiritual successor's source material? Let's talk about it. The game's music is also solid, but is far from remarkable, as I found it lacking musical variety in certain sections of the game. The soundtrack was composed by a trio of veteran video game composers, including the return of Grant Kirkhope, most well known for Banjo-Kazooie, joined by David Wise, known for Donkey Kong Country, and Steve Burke. The trio did a fantastic job of infusing the soundtrack with nostalgia, as many of the tracks evoke a feel of a classic 3D platformer. Kazooie and Tooie in particular, unsurprisingly so. Much of this nostalgia is captured via bright, playful, and melodic tunes, many of which capture an exploration type of vibe by imparting bouncy melodies, accomplished with a brass and string instrument emphasis. Additionally, the music often adapts to the diverse worlds, giving each world their own distinct audio flavor, helping make each area more memorable and immersive. Overall, I will award the OST a 7.5 out of 10 because while good, it never propels itself to something magnificent nor miraculously memorable. Now, let us inspect how the title fares in the graphical quality and fidelity departments. As mentioned previously, Yooka Replayee has significantly improved graphical fidelity when compared with the 2017 release. Such improvements feature an entire visual overhaul with greater detail, a more varied and more dynamic color palette, updated character models for the entirety of the main cast, along with all support cast, NPCs, and enemies. The greater detail in the new character models is evident during the initial sequences of the prologue, as players can see fuzzy textures as well as entirely reworked animations for all characters. Environments are now far more vibrant and highlight dramatically improved lighting effects, which rectify the original's darker and gloomier visuals, a common shortcoming associated with the original release. Overall, the game makes remarkable use of its varied biomes and utilizes a profound color palette to excellent effect. One moment you might be traversing the breathtaking lush jungle landscape of the tribal stack tropics, and the next you might be basking in the radiance of the captivating portrait-esque visuals featured in the Galleon Galaxy. All told, the development team hit a home run with the visuals. While it might not reach the visual fidelity of Sony's Astrobot, it commands a respectable presence in the action platformer genre with this wondrous, cartoony visuals. As such, I will award the game a 9 out of 10 in this area. Discussing the graphical fidelity of Yooka Replayee is a great segue to our next review metric, the game's art direction. Graphical quality does not make or break a game, often because art direction is a more important aspect to consider. I agree with this. That said, what happens when you have a game that possesses great graphical fidelity in addition to excellent art direction? This is a win-win situation and is thankfully something that Yooka Replayee excels at. To clarify, art direction is the process of overseeing the visual style of a project, to ensure it aligns with the distinct strategic vision, albeit in a consistent manner. Put simply, the game features great art direction and is consistent for the entire experience. Every character and area feel entirely different and original. While the general aesthetic is reminiscent of Banjo-Kazooie and its sequel, Replayee does enough to merit its own existence, and does so by standing confidently and tapping into creative expression with conviction. Yooka-Laylee had strong art direction in 2017, although it's only now, with the full-scale modernization, that the artistic expression has been fully realized. This was brilliantly accomplished by retaining the original release's bright, chunky, and personality-oozing visual style, and enhancing it by adding excellent quality-of-life features to refine and polish the aesthetic. These efforts to augment an already solid artistic backbone resonated with me and made me smile for the duration. Indeed, I suspect that Replayee is what the developers originally had in mind back in 2017, and it was a joy to experience the art direction come full circle. These triumphant efforts are very impressive and are why I will award the game a 9.5 out of 10 in the art direction category. One element that can make or break a game experience is the technical state and performance at the time of playing, and unfortunately, I have an unfavorable opinion of the game in this aspect. Let me tell you why. I will not discuss this aspect ad nauseum, because it is quite possible that some of, and hopefully all of my grievances will be rectified by a future patch. Nevertheless, as of the time of this writing, October 27, 2025, the game is in a subpar technical state, which is to say that the game suffers from an unfortunate amount of uneven textures, a decent amount of pop-in, and visual bugs that could range from distracting to immersion breaking. Thankfully, the game ran at a smooth 60 FPS while playing on the PlayStation 5, although it's been reported that the Nintendo Switch 2 version is capped at 30 FPS, and many players have reported significant frame pacing issues, visual glitches, and even game crashes. PC players have also cited issues surrounding the game's technical performance, and have expressed discontent with how demanding the game can be, especially when traversing areas with a lot of grass and fast-moving visuals. It is also worth mentioning that the PC version of the game does not support FSR nor DLSS, but it does feature graphical presets from low to ultra. Thankfully, not all is bleak on the technical side of things, because the developers are responsive to constructive feedback and have expressed a desire to address these issues by implementing a performance mode to achieve 60 FPS on the Switch 2 version, as well as exploring creative solutions to mitigate some of the other well-known issues. Unfortunately, I could not provide a score based on the anticipation of these issues being corrected in the future, and in its current state, I regrettably award the game a 6 out of 10 in this category. Now, let us look at the mechanics featured in Yooka Replayee and determine if they were implemented in innovative ways. While operating closely within the confines of the 3D platformer genre, Yooka Replayee features several innovative mechanics layered within the more conventional norms of the genre. First, the game features a world expansion mechanic which permits players to utilize items such as pages to unlock new worlds or to expand already discovered worlds with additional content. This is a nice twist as it gives players greater agency and a more customized approach to tailor the experience to their ambitions. Also, as mentioned previously, the transformations that our protagonists undergo are highlights offering unique experiences. Although this mechanic was introduced in Kazooie and Tooie, Replayee feels like a fully realized and refined version of this vision, seeing the devs innovating and having fun again. I was very excited to find out what new transformation Banjo and Kazooie would incur when inhabiting a new region back in 1998 and 2000 respectively, and the feeling persisted when playing this spiritual successor. Kudos to the development team. All told, Replayee features several unique mechanics, although they are more of a refinement of established mechanics introduced in other 3D platforming games rather than radical reinventions. They are fun and colorful iterations of what has worked in the past, and I am completely fine with that. As such, it might surprise you, I award this game a 9 out of 10 in this category. Now, let's look if this game was able to foster any unforgettable moments. Speaking for myself, and I know that I'm not alone, a game creating unforgettable moments that stand the test of time is great icing on top of the cake that few contemporary games accomplish. In fact, I can only think of a handful of games released in the last 5 years which have crafted unforgettable experiences for me. Does Yooka Replayee do enough to warrant inclusion on the premier list? No, it does not. But it does foster an incredibly fun experience that serves as an adequate extension to Kazooie and Tooie. Although I might forget some of the finer details of this game later down the line, I will not forget the overall feeling of euphoria when I first started playing the title, as well as the harrowing feeling when my time with the game had concluded. This is a testament to a job well done in this department, and why I will award Replayee an 8 out of 10 in this category. Now let's look if this game left an emotional impact upon me. One essential element to consider when evaluating a game's quality is my ability to emotionally connect with it. All of my favorite games of all time occupy a special place in my heart, and while all are different, they are all irreplaceable. My emotional investment in a game does not always mean that I fall in love with a particular character, nor does it have to mean I was an emotional wreck when the credits rolled. While these two are instances of excellent examples of myself connecting with the game in a profound way, an emotional investment in a game can also be measured by the way it reminds you of other great games that made you feel a particular way in the past. We can also be subject to nostalgia and how former game experiences and shape current and future experiences. Thus, nostalgia is the primary reason that Replayee captured my attention and was emotionally invoking. Despite lacking heart-wrenching moments and dramatic cinematic scenes that leave you awestruck, the game could still capture your endearment by appealing to gamers who grew up with classic 3D platformers, particularly classics of the Nintendo 64 era of gaming. Although the N64 is far from being my favorite gaming console of all time, it would be a disservice to the console to say that it did not impact my current perspectives nor shape my existing gaming preferences. This was primarily because of the excellent portfolio of 3D platformers it featured in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Therefore, while Yooka Replayee might seem shallow in terms of creating experiences that last with you forever, it does not lack in the ability to transport you to an earlier stage of your life, where everything was far more simplistic and fun. If you can fondly recall experiencing the joy and excitement of watching Saturday morning cartoons, then you can relate to the powerful weapon of nostalgia that Yooka Replayee proudly wields. This potent weapon alone is sufficient to procure a rating of 8.5 out of 10 in this category. Now, let's look at the overall value and post-game content of this title. While the game's main story can be completed in a very digestible 6 to 10 hours, gamers can expect anywhere from 10 to 12 hours of time investment should they elect to tackle the game's extra content. Additionally, completionists can finish anywhere from 12 to 18 hours. Is a short and streamlined experience a good thing? In this instance, I believe it is, as the title's short length is in line with the fact it does not demand a AAA price tag. In fact, it was released at a very reasonably priced $29.99 in the US across all platforms. It is true that the game is shorter than the 2017 release because of pacing improvements and the progression changes discussed earlier. Although, you might ask what post-game content exists once you complete the story, and is this content compelling enough to warrant investing more time in this world? Well, another change from Replayee when compared with Laylee are quills, collected through the game and used as currency to spend on visually appealing cosmetics, numbering 100 plus in total, as well as tonics. The tonics are not relegated to a mere gimmick, as there are 35 total, and they directly affect how you play the game with their gameplay modifying properties, such as making the game significantly more challenging and customizing visuals with interesting filters. It is also worth mentioning that the number of pages has more than doubled from Laylee, and now number around 300 in total. If you enjoy exploring every nook and cranny to collect everything, you are going to have a lot of fun with Replayee's post-game offerings. Finally, the game features a mode entitled Rextro's Arcade, which are new platforming minigames. I had a lot of fun with these arcade-type challenges, which keep things fresh by offering additional modes and puzzles for gamers who enjoy this type of appeal. Will you spend hours playing through the varied levels of Rextro's Arcade? You just might, and I would not shame you for it. All said, Replayee certainly lives up to being a definitive version of the 2017 release, because it adds a wealth of new and ingenuity-infused content that just might keep you returning for more long after the credits roll. I was compelled to play beyond the final confrontation with Capital B, and it's for that reason alone I award the game a 9 out of 10 in this category. Now we will look at our final review category, direction and overall execution. Alright guys, and with that we have finally arrived at the final review category. Phew! I know that I had a lot to say about this little 3D platforming game, although I will never discount a game on its surface. I take joy in deeply analyzing games from a plethora of genres, and this will be the format for all of the channel's reviews going forward. Thank you so very much for staying with me, and I hope you've enjoyed this content. Lastly, let us grade how the development team did overall regarding the project direction and how well they executed their vision with respect to the final product that arrived in consumers' hands. It was clear from the outset of the Replayee announcement that the team at Playtonic Games felt that their Yooka-Laylee game failed to enrapture gamers in the same regard as their previous works. Thus, to me it became evident that their vision was to focus on modernizing and redeeming the original game by creating more compelling content, enhancing subpar mechanics, and bringing it more in line with contemporary gaming standards regarding its visuals. This was a very noble and ambitious undertaking, especially if the intent was to also preserve the charm of the 2017 release and retain its classic 3D platforming spirit. In my perspective, the development team did a fantastic job of improving the overall aesthetic, incorporating essential quality of life features, and making the game feel much more responsive and modernized. This was all realized without forfeiting the original release's identity, which is a win-win for both the studio as well as gamers. I commend the effort on display, and I found the overall direction and execution to be excellent. The team identified a clear target, and the results speak for themselves. It is for this reason I will gladly award the game a 9 out of 10 in this category. Now that we have discussed all of my review criteria in detail, let me bestow a final score and verdict to answer a singular question. Is Yooka Replayee worth your time in 2025? To summarize, I greatly enjoyed my time with Yooka Replayee, and it delivered the experience I was hoping for, and I recommend playing it if you enjoy a 3D platformer that feels relatively modern while retaining the charm of the N64 platforming greats. Overall, it achieved a score of 113.5 out of 140 possible points using my grading criteria. This translates to an 81.07% out of 100%, or said differently, a rock solid 8 out of 10. Thank you for tuning in to my debut review. Many more spoiler-free reviews are forthcoming from Phoenix Ascends Gaming, and I hope that you take care and have an incredibly blessed day.
Phoenix Ascends, we're flying.